Hi, everyone, and welcome to another program with the Alabama Museum of Natural History. My name is Allie Sorley. I'm the Education Outreach Coordinator with the Alabama Museum of Natural History, and with me is Keenan Holmes, a good friend of the museum. And in a second, I'll have Keenan kind of introduce himself and talk a little bit more about it, but I do want to introduce the program today, which is a program called Celebrate Biodiversity. It's a poetry lesson all about using poetry and language to talk about nature, the environment, biodiversity, and how special Alabama can be. So we wanted to bring Keenan on because he has a very particular set of skills that we are very familiar with at the museum. But why don't you kind of tell us who you are and how you're connected with the museum?
All right. So my name's Keenan Holmes. I'm a cultural anthropologist and archaeologist and excavator of all ologies. And I love earth sciences and geology and things like that. I became familiar with the museum and Alabama in general probably around 2004. I was looking for a camp to go to for the summer and get hands-on approach of the archaeology, anthropology, whatever ology. I wanted to get involved, and Alabama was one of the only programs in the country that had that opportunity, and I've been connected since 2004, 2005. It's been fun.
And he's been there for that expedition program. It's one we've talked about quite a bit. We're pretty partial to it, but he's been there as both a participant and staff member since that time, almost every year, right?
There's some gaps. There's some gaps.
Okay.
Gap, but 16 years connected.
More years than not. Yeah. There you go.
More years than not.
Right. And the reason I wanted to bring Keenan on here is because for expedition, we do night programs every night. And a lot of times they're more on the science based, and we'll do some games and a couple other things. But anytime Keenan's around, we ask Keenan to do, usually it's Thursday night, I think, but to do a poetry session with us, with the campers. And he's just so good at it. So we wanted to make sure, we're not having a full expedition this year or last year, but we wanted to make sure that we got to connect with Keenan again. And I personally believe, using language and poetry is an essential part of our lives. I think it should be something that we do as much as possible. And I have a feeling that Keenan might echo that too, or feel very similarly. You think so? Yeah. So we just, we wanted to bring him along and ask him to teach us a little bit about poetry and why it's important and how we can use it in our explorations of nature in Alabama. So, Keenan, what kind of got you into poetry? Like, why is this one of your particular set of skills?
I would also attribute that to the museum program at Alabama. We had journal time. And, growing up, the early 2000s, boys didn't keep journals and all these stereotypes that, the girls have their journals, and so we need to write things down too. And it's good for memory. And being an anthropologist, we write reports, we take notes on who we talked to 2 months ago, a year ago. My poems will mention what I did that day. And that helps me remember years on down the line. That helps me when I was acting. And I know the comedy portion of our poetry nights. I love the acting, and to memorize large amounts of text and lines, writing down and being familiar, getting good at Scrabble, understanding words and knowing the right word to use in a moment to express how you feel. And it's therapeutic. It's a great way if you had a frustrating day, just writing it down, and it's just a nice release. And there's just many reasons why I love poetry.
I think that's, using what you said, when having the ability to have the right words to express how you feel is such an important thing that I know it can be a struggle for me sometimes, and I'm sure it's a struggle for others. But like you said, utilizing these skills can help release that. And then also for me, sometimes it's nice when I'm out nerding out in nature, because I do that often, but it's nice to be able to describe my surroundings. It helps me in my observation skills. It helps me make more detailed observations about what I'm seeing. Without that, sometimes there's that pressure, I think, for scientific observations to be, I don't know, sometimes they can feel kind of pressured, especially if it's something that, you're a novice, you're just getting started, or it's just something you're doing for fun. But poetry and language is a way to help me, at least, make really great, pretty detailed observations about the
Yep.
world around me. Speaking of, if you guys are hearing weird chirping noises, there's birds everywhere, and I can't not make them be birds. So that might be part of the things. But so I think it's one of my favorites too at Expedition, especially because nature and the environment really come into that poetry lesson that you do at Expedition. Would you agree with that?
I would, yeah, because we reflect on our day. You know, we reflect on what we saw. Someone slipped in the water and a Helgramite got them on the toe. Like those are funny moments that we write down so we can enshrine it and memorialize and remember that. You know, remember that.
And I know that we have some examples from campers that I just have several like binders or folders or things of poems that a lot of the campers have let us keep. And it is nice because you get to read back and relive those memories.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree. And I'm just now starting, let me grab it. Hang on one second. Where is it? Oh, there it is. I'm just now getting like a full nature journal started. And I've started, pressing leaves and putting stuff in my nature journal. But one of the next big things I want to do is to keep adding more of my observations through poems and language and things like that in there too. So I think it's another way that we can use that, to keep, I guess, keep the present moment that you're trying to record around for such much longer. So, nature and poems are definitely not a new thing. Like we're not inventing some new concept. There's, it's been around for a long time. Do you have any examples of poets that you have enjoyed that maybe have nature as an influence or the environment as an influence?
Yes, Zikalasha, a Yankton Sioux woman from the late 1800s, and she, when I introduce people to poetry, and especially middle schoolers and high schoolers, a lot of them say they don't like all the framing and the rules and the iambic pentameter and all these things you got to keep track of and what formation, what style, and that's why I love prose poetry. It's a lot more free. You know, you can do short stories, novels, novellas. You can do everyday speech. You can talk about that mailbox outside your house and it's free. It's free writing, it's free range, it's you put on paper, you don't get caught up in the framing of it. And I like that. I feel a lot of scientific writings that have a lot of jargon and there are articles that are written just for someone else in the community. Why want someone who's not in our community to read it and fully disseminate everything they can out of the reading? So I like how she spoke and how she wrote. And it was political, it was environmental. She talked about her life and being adopted and being raised by different culture, and so different people. So this little excerpt I'm going to read because I'll explain why I think this is funny. So Zeke Kalashaw is her name. And this one's called Coffee Making. And I'm not going to read the whole thing. I'm just going to read the first 3 lines to get a style for how she writes. And it's very everyday talk. And I like that. One summer afternoon, my mother left me alone in our wigwam. And that's important because not all indigenous people have the same type of sleeping quarters or shelters. So as an anthropologist, when I see that, oh, her culture, her people had wigwams. So like it's the bits of information that are historical that you get and explains about her and her people and her culture, and I like that. So my mother left me alone in our wigwam while she went across the way to my aunt's dwelling. I did not much like to stay alone in our teepee, for I feared a tall, broad-shouldered crazy man, some 40 years old, who walked loose among the hills. All right. Wiyaka Nabima, which means wearer of the feather necklace, was harmless, and whenever he came into the wigwam, he was driven by extreme hunger. So it's something that women can relate. When your family's gone and you're hanging out alone where you live, there's that creepy guy down the street, like, "Mom, come back," So it's relatable. And she talks about, oh, he was harmless. He just was really hungry all the time. And like things like that everyday talking, but this is poetry. This is written work. I enjoy that. I just enjoy things like that. So
and I like that, like you said, it's anthropology, but from a person's own voice. So you get to hear it from their story told from their perspective, right?
Right. It counts as a first-hand source, some of it's autobiographical,
That's really neat. So, and I mean, and it's a poet that I'm not familiar with, so I really appreciate that. I think I'm going to try to look up that book and see if I can
on Amazon for $12.
Okay, perfect. So, and I think that um, people have other examples that they're into too, and it can be. And I also like that it's like, the environment and nature isn't just. It can, a lot of it is look at that pretty bird or look at that pretty leaf, but it's also my environment and where I am is
Mhm.
important too. And the reason I'm saying that, as far as inspiration goes, I feel like you can be inspired by lots of things that you're looking at, or that you're around, or that's around you. Do you find inspiration in nature? Do you find inspiration for your poetry in things that you're seeing, or um, is that an easy source, I guess, of inspiration for you? Especially, let's say, for someone who maybe is wanting to write poetry, is trying to get
Right.
started.
So my inspiration comes from what I'm doing outside, and I meditate once a week where I decide how can I be a better friend, a better human being, make more money. Like I process all that, and when I meditate, and that's when thoughts come to me because I'm quiet. I'm in a
Mm.
quiet room, but when I'm outside, I love flying kites. And if I read one of these poems, I might get to that. But I love flying kites. I'm a grown man. I love flying kites. I will bring a lawn chair and a kite, and I will sit outside for an hour and a half. And I bring my steno composition book, and thoughts just come to me. I bike 100 miles a week. I go to the lake, and I bike around the lake, and I just pull my bike over, sit on the gazebo, and just watch the ducks cross. And things just come to me. Being outside just really opens up your mind, and when you're less, there's more distractions, more things moving, but you're also more relaxed simultaneously.
And I think for if there's times where you can't really get outside, or if you're in a spot where maybe going outside isn't something that's completely possible for you all the time, you can even find things like that looking out a window,
Right.
or looking at the things that are in your house and around you. I mean, we just did a whole program called Bama Bug Fest that was earlier, nope, just a little bit into last month. But
Mhm.
we talked about, nature that finds its way into your home. Sometimes insects come into your home. Sometimes other things come into your home. That's, nature and the environment, and, your pets or your siblings or whoever is around. So something just flew. Sorry. Speaking of bugs in your home. But but yeah, I think that's great. I love that. And I love that inspiration is just, there really isn't any pressure to it,
Mhm.
right? It's just something that's nearby and close by that makes you feel good, or even, or makes you feel something, makes you react in some way. Would that be a good way to say it?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Because we can observe a moment and then just let it go. But it's
Mhm.
fun to like really, really think about that moment. Like that was a beautiful thing, or like it's the last sunny day and it's going to rain for 4 days. Like just enjoy that. We're going to lose the sun for a few days. It's going to be raining all the time. Like taking time to really just pay attention to like what's going on around us. I think that's just helpful. It makes us more observant, and we appreciate things more because not everything lasts. Whether it's weather, people in our lives, like not everything stays the same. So I just like to make time for it. But
Make time. That's good. That's it. That's going to be your phrase. Make time.
make,
Keenan Holmes says, make time. Okay, so I know you've got a little bit planned for us, and I want to go into. I forgot. I kind of jumped over it. I didn't mean to, but I got really into what we were talking about. But you teach poetry lessons not only to people in the woods and tents at Expedition, but you also teach poetry elsewhere. Is that right?
so yeah, I'm connected with a nonprofit right now. With quarantine right now, I haven't worked with them in this past year, but
Yeah.
yeah. So I'm one of the instructors, and I teach art and mental health. And I talk about Van Gogh when he made Starry Night. He checked himself into a mental asylum because he knew something was going on with him. So him being so aware of himself. And I talk about art. I talk about writers and how where like all the great everything's the great naturalists, the great writers, the great athletes. Like they persevered a lot of things. I like talking about that underneath stuff that got their
Mhm.
mind to produce on paper or on painting these masterpieces.
Right.
So I love talking about poetry, and because it helps with your homework, it helps you make better outlines. You don't have to go to thesaurus.com to find that right word for your paper because it just comes to you naturally because you used it in a poem last week and it's still in your brain.
Yep.
So it's just I like building up the mind. I love sports too, but I love building up the mind. You know,
Mind and body. Make time.
yeah.
Right. All right. So I know that you teach several types of poems and how
Mhm.
to create them, and I don't want to say rules, I guess, but well, I guess maybe the rules around them, right? Because some
Mhm.
poems do have some structure and some rules to them.
Right.
Um, do you, I know we talked, I think we're going to talk about maybe two different types. Is that right?
Yep.
today. What are the two we're going to talk about today?
All right. So we're gonna first talk about the haiku, the
Okay.
Japanese style. And so there's multiple types of haikus. There's kiru, which is like two related ideas. There's kigo, which means seasonal related and talking about like the elements and like things that are changing in time. And
Hmm.
so we're going to do the nature haiku. And then
Okay.
senryu is people related and contemporary and politics and stuff and human related. But haiku in particular, we're doing is nature related. And that'll be
Okay.
the first one. So discuss the second one or we get to the second one later.
Let's preview the second one,
Okay.
and then we'll
The
keep
second one's
going.
just going to be a classic ABAB formation,
Okay.
where in four lines of text, the first and the third line rhyme, and the second and the fourth line rhyme.
Okay.
And then you just continue that all throughout. And some people have a closing line that doesn't rhyme, or they finish in that rhyming scheme.
Okay.
So yeah, so it's called ABAB. That's pretty
Okay.
pretty classic and good for anyone starting off.
Good. Yeah. Nice, familiar,
Mm.
get into it kind of stuff. Okay. So let's start with haiku. How do haikus work? What do we
All
need
right.
to know about
So
haikus?
there are two. I mean, there's multiple ways to do this. I mean, 66 different versions, but the version we'll be doing is the 5-7-5 or the 3-5-3. So what that
Okay.
means is the rhyming scheme, the mora or moray or syllables.
Okay.
So the syllables is how we break up a word like apple, two syllables, apple, right?
Hmm.
So when we do a 5-7-5 scheme, there's three lines,
Okay.
and the first line has five syllables. The second line has seven syllables. And then your third line brings it home with five syllables again.
Okay.
And so that rhyming scheme, you have to be very particular in the words you use because you have to count like, oh, automatopoeia, way too long. You can't use certain words when you want to fit it in. So
Right.
it's fun because it makes you think harder, but the words are more impactful. So
Oh, I like that. Yeah, that would make sense because if it didn't fit in, you would have to adjust your word choice
exactly.
and be intentional in the word choice that you use.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Well, cool.
So do you have any examples?
Of course.
Of course you did. Look at him, prepared.
All right. So I have two, both environmentalish esque, naturey. One
Yeah.
of them, I didn't title these. I usually title them. So this one
Okay.
is, so I'll hold my fingers up as I'm reading.
Okay.
Spirals and chambers, ammonites and nautilus, extinct, the living. So I'll read that again. So,
Okay.
spirals and chambers, ammonites and nautilus, extinct, the living.
I love that. Oh my gosh. And that just speaks to my paleo heart. How'd you know Ammonite were one of my very favorite of all
I
time?
know it's almost as if I know you.
That's crazy.
So yeah, that's one example. Do I have time for another?
Yes,
Okay.
please.
Yes. All right. So this one is I didn't name this one either. All right. Window of 2 months. Look what grew between the rocks. Cahaba lilies.
What are you doing? How did you know? Oh my goodness. I hope everyone that's watching this, if you're in Alabama, please go visit. Actually, it's almost Cahaba Lily time. We might be, I think we're like a week away, aren't we?
So what is it?
Yeah,
We're in May. Yeah.
right? It's toward the endish of
Yeah,
May
it's
usually.
mid-May to end of June. Yeah.
Yeah. Keenan, you knew your audience. And I know that you've seen them. Have you seen them out growing in between the rocks at the Cahaba?
Yep, twice.
Right.
Oh,
They're
it's
beautiful.
super special. Like, wow, there's not many places in the world you can see this, and I'm here. That's cool. It's not like a dandelion that you can see anywhere under the sun, but that's a very specific location. That's special. That's cool. That's cool.
That was beautiful. Thank you so much. I usually have examples, but I'm not gonna lie, they're interesting. Mine so we have a ton of birds in our back, and so mine talks about how birds communicate to each other, and I always wonder if two different species of birds, when they're making their bird noises, if they like overhear other conversations, like other species, like if someone is one bird is sitting there. Granted, we're anthropomorphizing, we're putting some human stuff in there, but if one bird is like gossiping about some other birds, like does the cardinal know what the sparrow is saying, you
Right,
know?
right. Or is it like Morse code? Like it's their own like language that it's like boop, 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 boop. It only goes to that person. Everyone's like, oh, what they say?
Yeah,
They'll
exactly,
never know.
exactly. um, so okay, so we had that haiku, which is beautiful. What about the ABA one? Can you help us with that one?
Sure, sure. All right. So as a reminder for those watching, this is the first line and the third line rhyme, the second line and the fourth line. So A B A B. All right.
Okay.
So the A's connect, the B's connect. All right. I didn't name this one either. I told you I'd mention kites, but here we go. Beautiful day. I'm glad I'm flying my kite. String between my fingers, tethered to Spider-Man's big head in the sky. Later, I might search the creek for Helgramite. Don't ask me why. Remember, Keenan, don't get pinched by that little critter. If I see trash in the water, I'll pick it up. Pains me to see the litter. The trash can was made for that cup. The end.
Oh, it's beautiful. Also, excellent kite choice, I must say. Is that an actual kite that you have?
Yes. No.
Excellent kite
no.
choice. No, yeah, no, definitely not. I just saw it the other day somewhere. And if anyone's interested in Helgramites, we did an entire series. Well, I say entire series. It was very exciting. At least 2 videos that featured Helgramites in our Bama Bug Fest from last year and our Museums from Your Home. Todd Hester, who you are also familiar with, who's a naturalist here in the state, he and I went bugging in a creek. I guess not really a creek. Anyways, but we went bugging. And the very first rock that he flipped over had a Helgramite like this big, Keenan.
Ooh, big one.
And big little, big pinchers and the whole Helgramite thing. And then we had there's a character of Helgramite on Supergirl, and the actor who plays Helgramite, Justice Leak, came and spoke with us. He spoke with us with an aquatic entomologist because, Helgramites are insects that live in the water. Anyways, but there was an aquatic entomologist talking about Helgramites in real life. There was the actor, Justice Leak, who played Helgramite on Supergirl, talking about his characters and seeing if there was any similarities. And then there was like a comic super fan that was talking about the comics and the
that's like Zen.
That was so good. Yes, perfect. Anyway, so if you're interested in more about Helgramites and learning more about the poem that or the what should I say, the featured characters and Keenan's example poem, there's some videos we can link in the comments for you, or I'm sorry, link in the description box for you. Okay, so that was okay. So we're gonna recap real quick. We have the haiku, which is you gotta tell me if I'm doing this right. So it's either 5 syllables, 7 syllables, and then 5 syllables, or 3, 5, 3.
Common 2, yes, yeah.
Those common 2, and oftentimes nature as a subject, right? Mm-hmm. And then there's the ABA one, which is where the first and third rhyme with it's the ending word, right? That rhymes with the ending.
The last words, right?
Last words, okay. And then the second and the fourth one rhyme at the end. Are there any? I meant to ask you on that one. Are there any limitations on like for the ABA on length of line or anything like that, or is that just kind of up to the artist?
But then this is where you have to get skillful at another part of writing poetry, is being open, like how you present them, and being, if you're an introvert, being extroverted enough to like accentuate how you say and really sell it when you're reading out loud. Because if you have a long poem of a long line, you have to enunciate loud and big that last word so people remember when that rhyming word comes back later.
Okay.
If I just say cup, what's up, over there, and I rhyme like just short little lines, it's easy to remember. But if I have these funky lines, I have to be like, in the sky. And then I'll read my next long line, don't ask me why. But you remember that sky because I said it big. So when the lines get longer, you really have to be animated in how you share the poetry. So that lingering word from 2 lines ago, oh, that's what he's rhyming with, So there's no limit. Then you have to do more work when you're saying it.
Right. Okay. All right. That's good to keep in mind because I wouldn't have even thought about that. If you want to share it, there's potentially like a hint of performance in it
Right,
to keep in mind,
right,
right?
right. And that's why I love slam poetry. And that's, I know we're going to talk about like, adults and poetry and stuff. Could we
Yeah,
segue now?
yeah,
Or, you're right.
yeah. Go
Um,
for it.
so, working with adults and teens with poetry, adults are like, where do I, where do I get involved? Do you have
Yeah.
busboys and poets down there?
Do we have what?
Busboys and poets. Is that a chain where you are?
No, unfortunately
Okay.
not for us. Maybe we should get
Okay.
it started though.
So yeah, it's a coffee food spot, and there's books. It's a bookstore. You can eat there, restaurant, and they have performances, poetry, and they show documentaries inside. So it's a nice
Yeah.
multi-shop, it's like a really elevated hip bookstore with food and
Right.
performances. And slam poetry is a great example where people talk about current affairs, civil rights stuff, and indigenous concerns, water rights, all sorts of topics, and people get really fired up and emotional in a constructive way. And even if it isn't constructive, that's their release, that's their therapy, that's their how they feel better letting it out to an audience. And so that slam poetry is a great way because it's very similar to like a rap battle. It's very similar. You are organizing words in a melodic way that rhymes. Writing poetry can help you write raps. If anybody
Yeah.
wants to be a musician like that, it does help. You have to write these lyrics. You have to make them fit in the beat. And so I think watching adults do poetry really gets me back into doing it.
Mm.
Yeah.
Well, and the whole, intentional word choice too,
Mm-hmm.
right? So for poetry and for if you're interested in writing lyrics for things, intentional word choice is huge. And that's what you talked about earlier too with poetry,
Right, right.
right?
And if anybody wants to be in a band, someone's got to write the music. So I mean, write the music and the lyrics. I mean, unless you're just an instrumental band, then never mind everything I just said. It's all useful. It's all useful. Mm-hmm.
So I'm glad that you said that. So people are interested in getting started. These two types of poems might be a good entry point, right, for poetry, and they can just kind of start on their own. But if they're interested in learning more about, I don't know, maybe sharing their poetry, they could maybe find some place in the community that is, even though we don't have that. Would you say busboys and poets? Is that what it was?
Yeah, some type of coffee shop has some flyer.
Yeah. We have things like art crawl nights and where you can crawl around to different galleries, and a lot of times it's static art that's on the wall, but there's performance elements to it too sometimes, so that could be
Yeah.
something maybe people could get involved in. And then different places around town, I know there are like open mic nights and things like that could be potentially a good place to,
Right.
if you're interested in sharing what you're writing, that could be a good place to do it.
And if you're an actor, actress, theater, when you're
Oh, smart. Yeah.
memorizing Othello and Shakespeare, that's poetry, and that's also the performative aspect of it. So, yeah, if you're into acting, you're already doing it, whether you realize it or not.
Okay, so do you have any like resources that might be helpful for people who are interested in learning more?
I would say the Poetry Foundation website, I
Okay.
think, is a really great resource because I think it's a very easy to use website, tailored well. They have different themes. Like right now, the top header is a collection on poetry and the environment. It's the first thing on the website right now.
Hmm.
It's a collection of poetry and environmental concerns. So I'm like, oh, that's cool. That's
How
time
did
what
they
we're
just
talking
they
about.
knew? Yeah, exactly.
Hey, redo the website. Thank you. And so they have samplers, they have collections, civil rights, Native American themes, and there's college age submissions and children's submissions. And there's just, you can pick by age and you can see what someone of a certain age is thinking in 2021 on this topic or that and the other. So it's just really cool because you get to see how everyone's thinking, and they cover across the board a lot of different concerns and issues and just even fun things that are light that don't have any real meaning or rhyme or reason. So I think the Poetry Foundation is a really good website to read others' works and see what's kind of trending.
Okay. Are they a .org or a .com? We'll have to I'll find it out. I'll put the link in the, just to make sure, I'll put the link in the description box. And I was thinking too, another really good resource is I think people go back to it all the time, but your local library is a great place to go. There are books that are all age groups that are there, and I know oftentimes they'll teach workshops or they'll have activities, or libraries do things, programming and outreach type programming all the time, and often language and literacy based programming, and it would be an excellent place to get into it if that's something that you're looking forward
For
to.
sure. And libraries are like the central nerve of like so many things like in your state. Like if you want to learn like how to read braille, or you want to 3D print something, or any
Mhm.
interest you have, a library can get you that information you need. Other than your school, libraries are such a good like central nerve for like that type of stuff.
Yeah.
Anything expressive. So they definitely would be a good resource for
So
sure.
I think that this has been a great intro lesson. Thank you very much for doing this with us, Keenan.
So,
The good news is, this whole idea of celebrating biodiversity, Alabama just happens to be a pretty good state for that. And, we've got a ton of things to celebrate nature and the environment wise. We're unique, we're special. And it's something that I think more people need to know more about. And maybe a great way to share more about it is to share it through this sort of medium, through a poetry medium. Um, from someone's own perspective, someone's own observations. And anyway, but so Alabama gives you lots and lots of fodder, lots of inspiration for potential poems. If you have any poems that you're interested in sharing with us, we would love for you to share them in the comment section. Or feel free to reach out to the museum, and I'll put links to how you can do that in the description box as well. But we just really want to thank you, Keenan, for spending time and teaching us and sharing your skills and your words with us. It was important and wonderful and lovely. So thank
I
you.
had fun. I like talking about this stuff.
All
Well,
right.
thank you so
Well,
much, Allie. Thank you.
hopefully I'll get to see you soon. We haven't seen each other in quite a while, but hopefully we'll get to see each other soon. And if not, then we can just share nature poems back and forth in the meantime.
Deal.
Done.
Deal. Well,
All
thank
right.
you.
Well,
Thank you all for having me. I'll be reading these comments too. So thank you.
ooh. All right, everyone. Thank you.